Hi, I'm Mitch Gallagher from Sweetwater, coming to you from Studio A at Sweetwater with Warren Huart. It's great to see you.
Good to see you again, as ever.
As ever, a pleasure to have you here at Sweetwater. You did a master class. You got all kinds of stuff going on. Yeah,
a lot of fun. Yeah, it's a great room. Obviously, love the 5088.
Yeah.
We had a fun time. The ATCs are absolutely amazing, but these are the new Focals, the Trio 6s, which we really love.
Yeah, they're fantastic, and of course the Ocean Waves as well. I mean,
yep.
There's an embarrassment of riches.
Yeah, there is, and if you want any piece of equipment, it's quite easy to get it.
Yes, yeah, that's a big advantage.
There's a huge store and warehouse attached to it. Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Well, you mentioned monitors, but an important issue for a lot of people working at home or even on the go is they're working in headphones.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about that. I mean, it's I'm curious. Do you find you have to take a totally different approach when you work in headphones than when you're using monitors?
No, but I do think that when you hear guys like me say stuff like that, who've been doing this for 4.5 million years, there has to be sort of a footnote to it. The reality is like, no, I don't, because I have been mixing on speakers with headphones my whole career, and I think most people have. We don't use headphones all the time when we were in a studio, but we're always checking, because there's something beautiful about strapping on a pair of headphones and listening and hearing like, oh, there's a little digital pop that I missed.
Right.
You know, and when you've got a pair of headphones strapped to the side of your head, you can hear so much more detail. I would always check my automation moves on my headphones. I'll mix a song, I'll get it to a place where I want on a console, and then I would go and sit back on a nice comfy chair back there after working here for a couple of hours and load it into my laptop, put on a pair of headphones, and have a listen and notice things like, oh, I need to push up a syllable here, or turn this down, or pan that over, all those little automation moves. So I've always been working on headphones and speakers.
Right.
All that happened is, out of necessity, you start moving more and more to headphones. And it's been interesting, the journey, because when I started, much like yourself, speakers and headphones weren't actually that good. It's been really, really blunt. You know, things that we take for granted as like industry standards, you were struggling on. I mean, NS10s are the most famous speakers in our business, but they're just two horrible, ugly mid-range boxes with no low end whatsoever.
Right.
That Bob Clearmountain bought in the late 70s, early 80s, because he wanted to put up a pair of hi-fi speakers, because they're originally hi-fi speakers, and hear what other people might be hearing, which was a very smart idea. And then, you know, he became the biggest mixer in the world, and everybody was like we all do as humans, go, well, we must do what Bob does because he's the best. Right. And so everybody went out and bought NS10s. Now, with things like this, I'm holding a pair of Focals, for instance, or these Focal speakers, or the ATCs and the Ocean Waves we're talking about. The detail in speakers and headphones is unbelievable. And not just in expensive things. That whole price range thing has come down. I'm amazed at what you can do for sort of $300 these days.
With monitors or headphones.
Yeah, monitors or headphones, yeah. We interviewed Steve Klein a few weeks ago, who's a big studio designer in LA and did so many of the rooms in LA that you go to. And he's made a point. I can't remember the price point he said. I think he said $600, but I don't think it's, basically the point was a $600 pair of speakers now is like what a $6,000 pair of speakers used to sound in the 80s.
Right.
You know, it's a wonderful thing. You know, technology is so incredible that you can measure. You know, when you built something with cheap components, you had a very limited amount of resources to measure it. Now, with all of the fancy tools that we have now, you can make those inexpensive speakers so incredible. And that goes for headphones. So getting back to your original question, I always worked on both, mainly using headphones for detail stuff. But out of necessity, especially when traveling, headphones become, you know, something pretty amazing. The first thing I noticed that I had to overcome was I was used to hearing ambience in a room that I didn't know I was listening to.
Right.
When you're only working in front of speakers, you're just thinking loudspeakers hitting you in the head. There's no ambience, you know, it's just so direct and all this kind of stuff. No, that's not true at all.
Right.
You're definitely hearing your room. Now, in negative ways, it can be, of course, exaggerated frequencies, or the opposite, you know, dips and in frequency response. But more than that, there was sort of a component of a room. So that took some getting used to, because I would strap on a pair of headphones and be like, wait, what's going on? Everything's much drier than I thought it was. And so I had to be careful that I wasn't suddenly swamping everything in reverb,
Right.
to kind of compensate for it. That's where, if you're new to working on headphones or speakers, whichever direction you're traveling in, that's why reference mixes are so important. Find things that you love and don't be afraid to reference. Because if you're going too far in one direction, but then you put on a mix that you love by an artist that you love, and you're like, oh dear, I've got 10 times more reverb going on than they do, I'm getting lost in it, And that was a big thing for me. I started referencing a lot of music. Now it's interesting, you handed me the Focals, which I know very well, the Mitch Gallagher model, the MGs. And when I first used the Focals, it was a little terrifying, because I hadn't heard that kind of detail in high mids. It was pretty scary. I was listening to, one of the favorite songs I ever mixed, my wife and I were listening to it last night, was Trevor Hall. And it was an album I did called Chapter of the Forest. He's just a big independent artist. And his vocal sound was really, really important to me that I get right. And I mixed it through my SSL, and I used 2 or 3 DSs. I got in there, I boosted a lot of high end, but I made sure it wasn't too bright. I did a lot of automation. And when I first got my Focals, I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna listen to that song that I spent so long getting the vocals right on. And of course I started hearing like T's that were too loud, and an S that could have come down another dB or two, and a little bit too bright here. And it was just like, oh no, So there's a little bit of that. I think people make that point all the time, don't they? They talk about how most people aren't going to listen to the music the way that you do. But with all that taken into account, we were at Bob Clear Mountains a couple of months ago, about 3 months ago now, and he and I had this conversation about how everything is starting to sound a little bit too safe. And I think that's a danger. A lot of modern pop music, whether it's your genre or not, and even a lot of modern rock mixing, everything is like really perfect. There's incredible plugins, which I love, like OX Sound Soothe 2 is one of the best plugins I think of the last bazillion years. It is an incredible plugin.
Yeah.
And every guy and girl that I interview, when I ask them their top 5 plugins, almost every one of them puts it in their top 5. Unsolicited. What's your top 5 plugin? Oh my God, Soothe 2. It's a lifesaver. Eric Valentine was the first person, still on Soothe 1 when he told me about it, the original one. And then Daryl Thorpe, who's a very dear friend, was just like, Soothe 2. And it was just like this snowball effect of all these massive Grammy Award-winning engineers and producers all telling me it was their favorite plugin. Problem is by us telling people how wonderful it is, that mentality, it's like suddenly we start looking for problems in everything. So we're using dynamic EQs and multiband compressors and all this fancy stuff on everything to make everything so even and perfect and whatever. You start doing that, you end up with a mix where everything is just so lovely and pretty and nice. Where in so many genres of music, it's supposed to be middle finger. It's supposed to be offensive, So I think that that is probably, a long answer to your question, is the only downside with working on headphones, is that I can get a little bit too obsessed. A little bit hearing, especially when it comes to beautifully headphones like these,
right.
With so much detail, that if I rely on this to make every single decision, back in the real world, when I play you my mix, you might be like, Warren, it's really good, it's really even and perfect. Boring. Where's the excitement? Where's the cymbals being a little bit too compressed in the choruses? Oh yeah, but they were so bright. Yeah, that's the point. When the chorus came in, the cymbals are supposed to be just a little bit loud, a little bit bright.
Right.
Classic rock, Zeppelin, the Stones a lot. Aerosmith, when they those outro choruses, the vocals fighting with the lead guitar, just a little bit. It's in the track a little bit. It's not supposed to be sitting 6 dB above. It's supposed to be in the track a little bit. But if I'm sitting there obsessing, I'm like, I need to hear every syllable. The point is like that's part of the energy and the angst that I'm sitting there like trying to understand what that guy or girl's singing about. It's supposed to be in there. And I think that can be a little bit of a danger when you're talking about moving from speakers to headphones. These are amazing. These particular headphones are incredible, and headphones in general are wonderful for hearing detail without any effect of the room or the dynamics around you or anything. It's all just here. But I've got to remember to not get too obsessed and not just get into those details too much.
Right. The last EP I did of my music, a lot of it was done working in earbuds in the diner here at Sweetwater. I was editing, I was
Oh, wow.
doing all the things, and my approach to exactly what you're talking about was to go the other way. So I would bring those mixes into the studio and listen to them just as a reference against what I was doing in headphones, because most of what I was doing was in headphones versus how you'd normally think of doing it, working on, checking your mixes on headphones, but listening on speakers. So that helps a little bit, is to get it out into the real world. The other thing that I've found helps with that is having a few different pairs of headphones. So if you do everything in one set, they're fantastic and they sound great in that set, but it's a little bit the same thing of checking on NS10s. Check on earbuds, check on a less expensive set of closed-back headphones that you might normally use for tracking. And work back and forth among a few different references can also be a big help.
Yeah. So obviously, Stephen Slate has got really into this, sort of basically trying to get rid of the problem that we're describing here, which is bringing in room ambience. And there's a lot of people that have tried it.
Waves as well. They have
Waves.
System, right?
Yeah. We've my wife and I went to Abbey Road it was 2018 when they launched the. Can't remember what room it is. I think it's Studio 3, where they recorded Revolver anyway. And we went in there and it was unbelievable. It was insane. I remember they gave me a pair of 7506s, the bog standard inexpensive Sonys, and I put them on and I listened, and I took them off and played the track through the same speakers it was mirrored. And I was like, wait, what just happened? And then I'd mute the speakers and put them back on. I'm like, it was ridiculous. They did an amazing job of modeling it. I know and of course, being Abbey Road, they wanted, we'll go to the pinnacle. We'll go to the most famous studio in the world and then take it from there. And they did an incredible job of it. And I was really excited. And a lot of people that watched that video went out and bought that to get that sound. And it is absolutely superb. What Stephen has done is he's gone and done that in multiple different situations and solutions. And he actually rents one of our studios. We have a studio. My wife and I have a studio that the two main control rooms are designed by Jay Kaufman. If anybody knows Jay Kaufman, look him up. Unbelievable studio designer. And Stephen had gone around all these different studios in Los Angeles, like everywhere, to find the flattest room. And he got so excited when we got into this room. He's like, this is a flat room. And he models the headphones in there.
Oh, nice.
And it's been exciting coming in there. It's also been interesting, to see somebody who probably doesn't need to work anymore, showing up every single day and being passionate about it on his own.
Yeah. Sitting
there doing it.
That's cool.
Not paying some team of kids to do it all for him.
Right.
Yeah, we're always continually amazed by that work ethic. But it's a relatively, I'm not saying it's free or cheap, but it's a relatively inexpensive solution to a lot of what we're talking about. I'm not here to sell that, but I think that for those of you that are 100% in love with speakers, for a lot of people, over the age of maybe 30, 40 years old that weren't part of the sort of headphone revolution, earbuddy revolution where everything moved over to that. For those of us that fall into that category, it's a good gateway drug because it will move you into headphones, but it'll still give you that experience. And he is obsessive.
Right.
I have not seen anybody with that much detail. We went away and came back, and he was still working on the same set of speakers in that room. He had done other ones, but he had gone back to it to make sure they were as flat as humanly possible.
Right.
Right. I won't say who it is, but there's a correctional software and a correctional hardware out there that he got back to them and told them it wasn't quite flat. That's how obsessional he is.
Right.
I was very, very impressed with it. So
right.
Anyway, Again, so that could be good for, in the sort of question of working on headphones. That could be a good way for people to transition because they're going to get the sound of being in a room, and you can take that ambience and dial it back. But it might be a great way of just kind of easing into that world for those people that are only used to working on speakers. Like I said, for me, it wasn't quite as tough because I was always checking in detail a lot. But then when I was forced, not thinking it was going to be a negative, to only work on headphones in certain situations, I realized I missed that experience of having the sound of a room, of the speakers, and when I was just used to using headphones only for detail work, now it was like, oh, now they're my only thing. But when I do live mixing, which I do quite often on the channel, I'll mix a song in an hour or two live from scratch.
Right.
I'm doing them on headphones.
Sure.
And I've done them on everything. I quite often when people send me headphones to demo, I'm like, okay, well, best way to demo them is to mix a song live in front of a few thousand people. Let's see how these work out.
Right.
And I think, I remember when Andrew Sheps came to the studio and he was demonstrating his plugin. And I had the Focals, the Trio 11s, the big brothers of these up. I had them up and I said to him, hey, I've just got these, and then I don't know if you know the sound of them. He goes, it doesn't matter. This is what we do. And I think that's what tends to happen. After a while, you learn some skill sets, you get used to your tools, you understand that if you're boosting 7 dB of a certain frequency, it's probably your environment that's making you think. You get that. I remember working with Jim Scott, for instance, on an Augustana record that I had produced and engineered, and he was mixing it, and I was sitting with him as a co-producer, like mixing it with him. And I needed to add some guitars to a chorus. He's like, can you just put some telly rakes down? And I was like, sure. So he pulls out a Pro Junior, puts a 57 in front of it, hands me a Telecaster, plug it in. He sets up the tone and the volume exactly where he wants to sit. Goes up to a 1073 and goes click, 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 1176, click, tick, tick, tick. I hadn't even played a note. And then I could go strum on an open G, and it's the best guitar sound I've ever heard. And he's like, I've recorded this so many thousands of times. He's done Tom Petty records. He did, some of the best records of all time. He was Rick Rubin's main engineer for like 30 years, maybe 40, what I mean? So all of this stuff, and it's like, yeah, of course, there's going to be just kind of so much acquired knowledge. So maybe, to round it back up, maybe that's the gateway drug for those people.
Certainly can make it more, give you more the aesthetic of working in a room. And I think that helps a little bit with the obsessing over details as well, because when you're in the room, you just don't quite hear all that stuff.
They're smeared, aren't they? They're just kind of smeared a bit. Yeah.
But a key thing that you pointed out there is really getting to know your headphones. And that's where reference mixes. I have like a playlist of like 30 songs that I always use.
What's in your playlist?
I have specific songs for specific things. Like, for example, there is a Sarah McLachlan song called I Love You that has the lowest sub-bass note that
who would have thought of Sarah McLachlan as having the lowest sub-bass?
Way down there. And so if you can hear that on monitors and it's relatively even with the note above it, I know that the room in the very low frequencies is pretty even. So you do that in headphones as well and start to recognize where you get things. I've got a LA guitar quartet, classical guitar quartet for imaging. Is amazing to be able to pinpoint where if nothing gets smeared. And so those kind of songs that can help you with, I'm not even listening to the song, I'm listening to where are the 4 guitars placed? Can I hear that low synth note? Can I hear the reverb tail in, there's a song called North Dakota off of Joshua Judge's Ruth, the Lyle Levitt album, that has George Masterberg did these gorgeous reverb tails. And if you can hear those die away to nothing, those kind of things are just little details that can really help you dial in on what you're hearing, whether they're high-end headphones, I did a lot of my work in Bose earbuds, and you just know them really well. And so you can start to anticipate what you need to do.
No, it's great. For me, it's Bob's mix of Woman in Chains because of almost exactly all the same things. There's so much depth, so you get to hear the front to back that you're talking about, which I think, all the talking we're doing and the thinking about it is remarkable, because you mix them on a pair of NS10s, which are just like mid-range forward, blah, hit you in the face. And yet you hear all of this distance. And you're just like, there's some serious clever going on, that he can create the depth in a mix where the speakers are barely showing it out at all. That's a very smart man. But also the width in that song is phenomenal, and the height. The fact that Adam's vocal comes in above Roland's makes no sense.
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Crazy stuff.
It's just absolutely insane. But for the same reasons you're talking about, for me, going back to working on headphones and how things can be so sort of like boom, slap, side of your head, everything really, you're not hearing any ambience, and you try to compensate for that. If I can put on Woman in Chains, I can see, oh, okay, I've either gone too far one way or the other. Maybe I've gone too dry and lost depth, and which happens a lot when you're overly compressing and EQing and limiting everything, and you're bringing it forward, and before you know, everything is like hitting you in the face, and you think it's powerful, and what it really is kind of small.
Yeah.
The bigger you make everything, the smaller it starts to get when it's all trying to just go down this little 2 tracks. And so that can really, really help me. And then, of course, the exact opposite, where I'm swamping it in reverb because I think it is too dry. And Women in Chains has got a lot of effects going on, but it's done so tastefully that I can really understand, where it's going. But yeah, very similar. I think for me, I've got a really limited amount of tracks because I'd rather know, and it sounds like you do too, 4 or 5 songs really, really well than sort of know 20.
Right.
I've
got more than that, but some of them are just, I really do just put them on and listen to them.
Right.
So I have the specific ones that are telling me individual things, but then there are things that give me more the overall sort of look at what's happening also. Another place that I know a lot of people struggle with headphones is low end.
Yeah.
Getting the low end right on headphones can be a challenge, and that's where the referencing can really help.
Yeah, I agree, because headphones, especially if they're trying to sell bucket loads of headphones, not necessarily, a headphone this kind of quality, but, in that sort of $150 to $300 headphones, they're selling to people that, yes, are mixing on it, but also using headphones for enjoyment purposes, to listen to music, all of which is totally understandable. But obviously listening for enjoyment purposes usually means a bit more smiley-faced, a nice, 10 to 12K sparkle, and a lot of like, 60, 50, 40 down. And the problem with that is like it's completely artificial. So if you're used to a room and knowing your speakers and getting your kick to sit just right, and then you put on a pair of headphones and suddenly it's like the boomiest, biggest thing you've ever heard. Or vice versa, you start mixing on it and you think you got it just right, and then you play it in other circumstances, you can barely hear the low end because, these inexpensive or whatever we want to call them, headphones are just exaggerating those low lows.
Right.
I remember when, what were they called? The Beats headphones first came out. They were terrible for that. I was working, they were good sounding headphones from a perspective of somebody who wanted to enjoy, modern music with extended low end and stuff like that. But I was working with the Fray, and we were in Vegas, and we did a cover of Happy Christmas, War Is Over. And so I was in the main room working on that, recording it, and Joe, one of the songwriters, was in the other room checking out some stuff they were working on. And so I came in to check it out, and he's like, yeah, check them out. He put on the headphones on me, and I was just like, what has gone wrong with this song? And I was like, took them off. I was like, oh, okay. And I was like, yeah, Joe, let's just listen through the speakers, But yeah, the low end was just so exaggerated.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of those things. It's fun to listen to music that's got a big smiley face on it. And as long as, like you're pointing out, the massively valid thing, as long as you understand that, you mix on pretty much anything. Mixing on NS10s proves it. If you can mix on a pair of NS10s with almost nothing going on below 100 hertz, and still mix Woman in Chains, then obviously, it is about knowing your speakers or knowing your headphones.
Exactly. Yeah. A subtle thing with headphones is something that I'm seeing more and more with headphone amplifiers, and that part of the whole system is a little bit of crossfeed between the two ears, because when you have headphones on, you're hearing left and right.
I think SPL were the first company I remember doing that. Very smart.
And that can make a huge difference. It's just a very subtle thing. You don't want a whole bunch of the left ear in the right ear, but when you hear things in the room, you have the Haas effect, and you have things that are going on because you are hearing with both ears. You're not hearing with one.
Yeah, the systems that we're talking about, Steve, the Slate One and Waves, etc. They have that built in because inherently they're capturing the room. But yes, you're right. I think SPL a long time ago did that. I used to see it in a lot of mastering studios where they would have the SPL monitoring, and they could get a much better idea. They could put on headphones to check detail, but also mimic what they were hearing in a room. And I think most mastering engineers would prefer that than putting in some kind of artificial ambience,
Right.
But yeah, that is a really important and a really great feature.
And it's another part of again, referencing on some kind of speakers if you can, even if they're little desktop speakers, just because you get so isolated with the left and the right, and our ears don't work that way in the real world. Now, the argument can always be made that what percentage of listeners are now going to actually hear things with earbuds and with headphones.
Yeah, I hear all those arguments and I take them all on board, and it's super, super valid. But I think at the end of the day, it is our job as producers, engineers, mixers, mastering engineers to just deliver at the highest quality level, and then it will translate the best it can. I understand, I see that comment every few videos. Somebody will comment, why are we worrying about how good these speakers are? Why are we worrying about the quality of these headphones? Why are we worrying about earbuds? People will say that all day because at the end of the day, people are only going to hear it on earbuds. Well, I have several answers to that. I think number one is we have to make it work in every environment. And secondly, everything is so much better. I don't know about you, Mitch, but this whole idea that when we were little kids, everybody had these, thousands of dollars worth of 70s hi-fis that our parents had. That was not like that. It was not like that. Almost me and everybody I knew at school had hand-me-down AM radios.
Right.
Maybe we had a Walkman, Sony Walkman. My parents couldn't afford to buy me a Sony Walkman. And even then, remember those little spongy frickin' headphones? They sound like this. As bad as MP3s where people want to make them, my frickin', what have I got in my pocket? Have a look. There you go. As bad as people want to make these things sound, this off my phone is 100 times better than what I listened to when I was a teenager.
At least.
And a kid. Yeah.
At least.
So if I can make it sound good on the best speakers and the best headphones and do my job to the best of my ability, I know that whether you're listening on these or on the best hi-fi system in the world, that's just part of the job. But yes, the great thing is, and we talked about this when talking about other pieces of equipment, the average now is so much better. Everything is so much better. And I think we have to suspend old ideas of when something that was only $300 was considered crap back in the 80s or 90s.
Right.
It's just all that's gone out the window.
Not the case anymore.
It's just not that. Yeah, microphones, headphones, speakers. The technology is there now, and it's an even playing field, and I love it. For relatively small amounts of money, you can get decent gear up and running, and really anything holding you back is creativity.
Right. So if I can summarize.
Please.
You want to reference, so you know your headphones really well and know what you're hearing. Be careful with ambience.
Yep.
Be careful with low end.
Yep.
And I would also add one more thing to that, and that is be careful with volume.
Absolutely.
It's easy with headphones to keep turning them up and up and up, and then not only, of course, is there potential for damage, but you hear differently as you turn things up. And in headphones, I think that's even more apparent than when you're cranking up studio monitors.
Yeah, I think these days things are so much better. I reviewed headphones, actually working with you guys where we did our studio build in our second to last studio, not our latest one, but the one before. We did a complete studio build in that, and we got maybe 8 pairs of headphones to try across the price range. And I've got to be honest, Audio-Technica in a sub 100, unbelievable. Unbelievable. Without even knowing price ranges, I had the Audio-Technica, and then I went to some of the, won't say, quite well-known brands in the sort of 150 to 300 range. And blind test, you're like, this is so close.
Yeah.
What I like is cheap headphones used to be just mid-range, disgusting boxes. And I'm sure there's plenty of those around if you want to go out and search for them and find some dreadful sounding headphones. But generally speaking, Audio-Technica, I think, kill it in a sub 100. Everything they make is phenomenal. It's tough to find things that sound really, really bad, but if you do put on a pair of headphones and they're really, really high, middly, and aggressive, probably not the way to go.
Right.
Because that is going to give you ear fatigue like crazy. Our ears are most sensitive around about 3 to 5K. Some would argue 2 to 5, but ultimately that's where our ears are most sensitive. When I was a kid on regular telephones, to keep the bandwidth down, they used to EQ it to only be between 3 to 5K. That's all you would hear of the human voice, because that's all you need to recognize one person's voice. If you just pull it down to that area there, people know it's me talking or you talking.
Right.
Below that, above that, no, but in that range. So that's where our ears are most sensitive, and unfortunately, being most sensitive there, that's the first part that gets turned down. So if you've put on a pair of headphones, maybe they're inexpensive, and I get it, but if they're just all mid-range, don't buy them.
Yeah.
You're going to really get so much ear fatigue.
Right, right. So along those lines, I have to ask, have you been in the retail store and checked out the headphone display?
Oh, I love it.
Isn't that fun?
Yeah. Carson and I were looking at it the other day. I mean, I think it's absolutely genius. It's really good for those that haven't done it, even just to answer questions.
Right.
Come down and use Sweetwater for that. You don't necessarily have to buy the pair of headphones, but if you want to know, it's just fantastic. I don't know how many's on there. There's like, I would say 40 or 50 pairs of headphones, and they're all playing exactly the same song. So you can go vocal, step, Byers, step, Sennheisers. It's genius.
Yeah.
Absolute genius. And you can get a real-time experience. I've never seen that before. I'm not saying that other people haven't done it, but that's the first time I ever got to experience it. Yeah. And it was interesting for these, because we knew the vocals well, and they were often in that 600-ish, 700-ish. There's a murky area. There's a few headphone companies that make headphones that I like in that price range, but then I get to something that's a couple $100 less, and I'm like, yeah, it's pretty close. Yeah. The vocals in particular, you could hear the difference in the price. I actually went, okay, this is a couple $100 more than that one, but it's a lot more detailed and not fatiguing to listen to. So that's a really wonderful way of experiencing that, because you can just, within, 5 minutes, hear what a $50 to $1,000 pair of headphones really does, and everything in between. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Very impressive.
It's a very, very cool thing. Just go in there and check things out.
Yeah, really good.
Well, man, I think the takeaway is you absolutely can make music using headphones. No limitation there.
No limitation whatsoever. And frankly, probably a good percentage of stuff that you hear these days is done on headphones. So we'd be fools to say that you can't.
Great to see you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for your insight and your wisdom.
Thank you.
Certainly been a pleasure.
Thank you.
All right. And thank you for joining us here in Studio A at Sweetwater. I'm Mitch Gallagher.